our biggest problem is our players look too structured. They look afraid to use their instinct and flair.
Grace is going to learn a lot very, very quickly. Fans over this side of the Tasman are excited to see what she does. Going to bring a lot to our competition.
Karen Berger must start at wing defence for us to be effective against Australia.
Sophie Garbin's really starting to own that goal shooter bib for the Diamonds, and her partnership with Austin is exceptional.
The girls have got to be given confidence that they're going to be given a decent chance to stay out there on the court and bed themselves into a game.
If they get in flow and they're confident and their ball retention is really slick, the Diamonds are just going to be very, very hard to beat.
With our players not being able to explore other opportunities in different leagues around the world, we need everything we can get.
No mai ki te hōtaka o te neti poro Kiwi. Welcome to the Kiwi Netball Show. I'm Bridget Tunnicliffe. It's been a while, hasn't it? But this is always the most highly anticipated series, the Constellation Cup between the Silver Ferns and Australia. The 4-test series starts on Sunday in Wellington, and to help me preview the series, I'm joined by West Coast Fever coach Dan Ryan and former New Zealand men's coach Dion Te Whetu. Kia ora, korua. First, just want to talk about the recent series for both countries against England. The Roses played 3 tests against Australia, managed to pick up a win, which is pretty rare on Australian soil. Dan, what stood out for you during that series?
Yeah, thanks for having me. First of all, I think it was a great start to the international series to see the series go to a decider, I guess, in that third test. And, you know, really pleasantly surprised with the way in which England showed up and really invested some great time into their next generation talent. And seeing some of those players really step up and shape up against the Diamonds was great to see for international netball. And I think probably most impressive early days for the Diamonds was perhaps their ability just to respond from a loss, which I think, you know, they do better than any other team on the planet, to be honest. It's every now and then you get a win against the Diamonds, but how do you back it up with successive wins? That seems to be a real challenge, but a great starting point for the international campaign.
How wary would you say is Australia of England, because they seem to be improving all the time? I know that I think we're pretty nervous here. How wary is Australia?
Yeah, I think very mindful of the growth that English netball is taking and has taken over a number of years. And obviously now with the evolution of their Super League competition as well, they're only going to get stronger over the next 4-year cycle. So they'll certainly be front and center of the Diamonds. And, you know, the addition obviously this year with Fran Williams into SSN has been huge for them, but also Jen Allison steps into the Firebirds next season, which is going to further enhance her credentials. And, you know, the more players they get exposed to Suncorp Super Netball to support the likes of Housby and Cardwell and those types of players that are dominant on that world stage, it's a really positive sign for England that I'm sure Australia will be very, very conscious of.
For me, the scary thing is that England netball is now producing players within their own country who are highly competitive as soon as they hit the international arena. That's the big difference between England now and England of the past. I mean, Lois Pearson, what an international debut she had against Australia and New Zealand. Nothing flashy, but she just did her job. Then England came to New Zealand and beat the Silver Ferns 2-1. Dion, what did you see as the main issues for the Silver Ferns during the Tiny Jamison series?
First and foremost, I think we've got the team and we've got the players. But I think our biggest problem is our players look too structured. And I think they look afraid to use their instinct and flair. And I think the reason for that is they're afraid to be taken off. And I think that's a real shame. I think the Roses feeders just had a field day getting to circle edge. They were pretty much, you know, in those first 2 tests, so they were getting to circle edge with ease. And then when they were circle edge, they just weren't getting pressured. I mean, they were passing the ball to each other across the circle and still getting easy feeds. And I think we focused too much on double teaming to Sheen. I think, you know, Kelly's capable, but I think that Harris sort of in there and just, you know, leaving Housby to do whatever she wants with the ball is a massive mistake. So those are sort of the key things that I picked out.
Yeah, I agree with you. We have a good team. When you think of how much of a weapon Grace is, Milirene Canasio, a fantastic long-range shooter at goal attack, it feels like the Silver Fern should be doing better. Dan, I don't know if you caught up on any of those tests.
Yeah, I did actually. Obviously, keeping a really close eye on how Fran tracked, and I thought she had a really solid series for the Roses at the back. I think what was fascinating for me in that series was the inability, I guess, for the Silver Ferns to maximise their opportunities when they're up and in control on a scoreboard. And I think, it's very different in a Suncorp Super Netball game where you can be up by 10 and the game is still very much in danger, right? Where you look on an international court and if you can produce a 3, 4, 5 goal lead, they're margins that really become game-changing and monumental. And I thought the number of times that the Ferns got themselves into those winning positions in a third quarter or even in a second quarter where you're kind of coming into half-time, they're the moments I feel like those championship winning teams take full ownership of the game. And the Ferns just weren't quite able to do that, which was a little bit surprising. And I certainly agree with Dion. There's a lot of talent in that Ferns team that are good enough to be beating anybody in the world, which is the exciting part. It's just getting it all to come together in the right way, in the right moment. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a watch and see, I think, as to how they go against the Diamonds and what lessons they're actually learning from that series, which will be most important.
I think positive from the series was Nolene Toto was pretty happy with the amount of ball the defensive end got, especially in that third test. And Dion, how good was Paris Mason? 2 full games back to back.
Yeah, she did well, and I think having Kelly Jackson at the back for her with familiar, obviously very familiar with each other, but Paris did a great job. It was good to see another young player coming through for us, and we need that. For me, I would change her out for Lokatui for the Constellation Cup, personally.
So, Paris Mason out, Lokatui in?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Big call. Big call. Well, Paris Mason would have had a fantastic series, didn't she?
I think she did, but I also feel as though that we need more physical man-on presence against these goal attacks, and we just need to let Kelly do her job. Now, she was probably directed to come in and double team. I'm not sure. I just think Lokatui, if you look at that game, she had a couple of runs she had for the tactics at goal defence. She made massive difference, and she's actually a really, really good goal defence. Underrated in this country and probably little known for it. But yeah, I think against Australia, I think Paris Mason might find herself a little bit out of her depth.
Okay. Well, yeah, I definitely think Paris Lokatui's time will come. She is an incredible talent. I can't help thinking, Dan, that if Jess Thirlby had started that final test with Fran Williams at goalkeep and kept her there for the whole game, the result might have been different.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think it's an interesting position for Jess to find herself in, having, claimed that series. And then, do you go really hard for the clean sweep and be incredibly dominant, or do you exercise a bit of the depth in your squad because the opportunity is there to do so? And I think it's a really fine line because a team like the Roses are still in this process of learning how to win all the time, but also ensuring they've got all the boxes ticked for the next 4 years to make sure they're exposing what they need to expose. So I think a true testament of a squad is, they can win with any 12 players on the court or at least 10 or whatever it looks like. But I think there would have been a lot of thought into that starting lineup and that change. But at the end of the day, they take the series. They know what's worked. They've learnt a lot. And their players have had some really good exposure against the Ferns, again, away from home. So they'll take all of those value adds for sure.
Okay, let's look ahead to the Constellation Cup starting this Sunday. Stacey Marinkovic named a team of 15. Defensive duo Joe Weston and Courtney Bruce have returned from injury. Dan, any surprises in that team?
No, I don't think so. I think, probably a lot of people have been surprised not to see Ash Irvine in the mix and for her to have a look. She's had a pretty good SSN season, and obviously, building the depth in that defence end is a key focus area for the Diamonds. I think probably netball fans over here in Australia are really eager to see Georgie Hoare just get out on court and make her debut. She's had a cracking couple of years. But outside of the new additions, it's pretty tried and tested for the Diamonds. So it'll be interesting to see whether there's any shifts in the lineup or whether any variations are used across the course of that series.
And Silver Ferns coach Dame Nolene Toto named her team today. The only difference from the England series is that Phoenix Karaka is back from illness. And Whitney Souness has been dropped. I'm not sure if that's to do with her ankle injury. Maybe it's not 100% right. And there is an asterisk over Paris Mason's name, subject to medical clearance. But Dion, the Silver Ferns starting 7 that got the job done in that final test against England, would you like to see that group start again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the one crucial piece of that puzzle is Karen Berger must start at wing defence for us to be effective against Australia. I think she was an unsung hero in that third test. You notice when Karen's on the court, Jackson actually plays her best and she can perform her core role at goalkeeper. And that's, for me, I think that's, the work that Karen does at the front. But apart from that, I think that team's solid. Apart from my controversial Lokatui change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my only thing.
What about wing attack? In the England series, we saw Kimi Orapoi, Whitney Souness and Claire O'Brien all spend some time there. Who stood out to you?
Claire O'Brien really stood out for me. She's just really solid, balances the court well. She feeds fast, which I think when you're playing with Grace, you've got to feed Grace faster. You can't allow the defence time to set up because Grace can get a little bit tied up with players that are on it. But if you let that ball go to her fast, she's pretty much unstoppable. And I think O'Brien did that really well.
Yeah, I thought O'Brien was great. And, Whitney Souness is obviously has her strengths in that position as well. But sometimes I find she's almost too frenetic, like a cat on a hot tin roof, whereas Claire brings that calmness. Jumping around a bit here, but Dan, I just want to talk about the fact that next year Grace Weke will be playing for the New South Wales Swifts. She'll be the first Silver Fern since 2019 when Laura Langman and Maria Folau got exemptions. How much of a coup is it for SSN to get Grace?
Oh, it's huge, and I think massive for the New South Wales Swifts too to rectify, I guess, their positioning back up the ladder. They'll have a massive year next year. There's no doubt about that. And Grace is going to bring Helen Housby back to life. She was a little bit quiet this year, Helen in Suncorp, and she was great in the international series. I think that's going to transfer with Grace as her partner underneath. And I think Grace is going to learn a lot very, very quickly. It's a different game. She's going to essentially be playing in World Cup finals every single week for 4 months. And it's only going to enhance her skill set that is great for New Zealand when she goes back into the Ferns environment. So it'll be a big shift from what she's used to. And there will be, I guess, a little bit of learning that goes along the way and some hits and misses here and there too. But from all reports, she seems like an absolute competitor that's just going to lap it up. And I think fans over this side of the Tasman will be really interested to see what she does, and really excited to see what she does more than anything. I think it's going to bring a lot to our competition.
How surprised were you that the Firebirds let go of Donnell Wallam? I think the Mystics will be very happy to have her next year after losing Grace, but wasn't Donnell like the second highest goal scorer this year?
Well, she was the number one Australian goal scorer, just sitting behind Janelle Fowler-Nembhard in terms of volume. So, she's a weapon. She posts big numbers. She can shoot from anywhere, and we know how dangerous she is. So I think a lot of people were surprised, but, she did only sign a 1-year contract, and it was a tough place, I think, for a few people to be, the Firebirds. So she was looking, I guess, as to what her options might be. But I don't think anyone really anticipated that she'd end up over in New Zealand. But I also think it's actually a great move for Donnell to grow her game even further as well. And, to try and maybe even create a point of difference for herself when it comes to diamond selection. If she's playing against the Ferns defenders every single week, what can she bring back into the diamond space that, might give her an extra edge, because positioned in that diamond shooting circle is ultra competitive. And, she hasn't been given a chance in these recent series as well. So it might be a fresh environment for her to keep growing her game. But, she's a world-class player, and I think any team that gets Donnell is incredibly lucky to have her, because she can win a game off her own hand. There's no question about that.
What are you sort of anticipating for the most likely starting 7 against the Silver Ferns? I mean, Sophie Garbin and Kira Austin were fabulous during the England series, so it seems likely that they'll be together. And the other end, just Stacey is spoilt for choice when it comes to defensive options.
Yeah, I think that end's probably going to be most interesting because of the Weston and Bruce's coming back into the lineup. And it'll be interesting to see whether Clow and Ariang, who formed a great partnership in the Diamond Series, get an opportunity to work together against the Ferns, or whether Stacey goes back to a bit more of the tried and true Weston-Bruce combination. But whichever way they go, they're really viable, exciting, dangerous options, and the depth and versatility is pretty elite as well. And maybe we see a little bit more of Sunday across wing defence in this series as well. So the front end, I think, is pretty much establishing itself in that mid-court where you've got the Hadleys and the Watsons that run that mid-court. JLP kind of pinch hitting in there as well. That's pretty dangerous, that part of the court. And, you know, Sophie Garbin's really starting to own that goal shooter bib for the Diamonds, and her partnership with Austin is exceptional. So, you know, probably expect Cara Conan to pinch hit a little bit off the bench more so, but Garbin, I think, probably sticking her hand up as that starting goal shooter choice.
Dion, what sort of improvements do the Silver Ferns need to focus on if they're going to have any chance of beating the Diamonds?
I just think the girls have got to be given confidence that, you know, they're going to get out there on the court and they're going to be given a decent chance to stay out there on the court and bed themselves into a game. And to Dan's point earlier, you know, we're talking about the Roses and, you know, trying to capitalise on those 2, 3, 4 point, you know, you get a couple of turnovers and you score them. I think they've got to feel comfortable out there on the court first and foremost. When I think back in history about the Ferns' success against the Diamonds, it's when we've played our own style and we haven't been too structured. Like, we've played within a structure, but, you know, the girls have had the license to step outside of that structure sometimes because, you know, against Australia, you have to have about 10 things in your bag, you know, just to stay in the game and be competitive for the whole 60 minutes. And I think whilst there is an area for having a certain amount of structure, again, in history, when I look back, it's the times when we've just relaxed and left our players on the court that we have had success against the Diamonds.
Dan, from where I'm standing, it doesn't feel like the Diamonds have any weaknesses. Where could the Silver Ferns target them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, every team's going to have their vulnerabilities, but it's up to the opposition to expose them, right? And I don't think teams have put themselves in positions for long enough periods of time to really get an idea as to where the Diamonds might be susceptible. So I think probably the biggest thing that the Silver Ferns are going to have to focus on against the Diamonds is just ensuring that the Diamonds' attacking line, more than anything, doesn't get too comfortable. Because if they get in flow and they're confident and their ball retention is really slick, the Diamonds are just going to be very, very hard to beat. So, but also just being able to navigate through tricky situations, I think that is what oppositions are going to have to try and create to break down the Diamonds. But the reality is, I think the Diamonds are so good at what they do and their adaptability is world class that's the big challenge point. You can, you know, any team on their day can beat anyone, but you've got to get to that point where you start seeing those fractures appear. And at the moment, we haven't seen too many of those gaps in the Diamonds game for a while.
Just want to quickly talk about the international calendar. I spoke to Netball New Zealand CEO Jenny Wiley yesterday, and she confirmed that the Nations Cup, I think it used to be called the Quad Series, in January is not going ahead. So that used to be between South Africa, Australia, England, New Zealand. So Netball New Zealand is now in talks with Netball Fiji about holding a series there, and they hope Australia will be involved too. It's a massive blow not having that quad series, and it also seems very unlikely that the Silver Ferns are actually going to play against Jamaica before the next pinnacle event. We know what happened last time Jamaica was here, and it's just as expensive to send the Silver Ferns over there. Dion, it doesn't put us in a good place, does it? The prospect of not playing Jamaica before the Commonwealth Games or World Cup is a bit of a worry.
Yeah, look, I think there's two things that have come out of that, and you mentioned one word, expense. Is that what it's coming down to? I probably feel as though that it is, and that's a shame. But I think that's a wake up call for netball worldwide in terms of, you know, do we need to you know, change a few things within netball globally and to generate some more opportunities for our players to be able to go back to how it used to be and travel on a regular basis. I also think for us in particular, with our players not being able to explore other opportunities in different leagues around the world, we need everything we can get.
Absolutely. We'll take anything now. Yeah. Dan, the debate continues to swirl over here around Netball New Zealand's eligibility policy, which means Grace Wiki won't be eligible for the Silver Ferns next year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a head scratcher, isn't it? I think it's a really difficult one because I suppose you can see two sides of the argument. I think when you look at it from a individual performance perspective, it is absolutely in the best interest of the players to be playing in Suncorp Super Netball and being match hardened every single week against the best in the world. It is why we've seen a massive growth in the Sunshine Girls in England, in the African nations, et cetera, et cetera. It's critically important for closing the gap. So, and it's only going to benefit the quality of the Silver Ferns if you've got more Kiwis playing in the best netball competition in the world. I guess then the flip side is, from a New Zealand market and commercial perspective, if your marquee players aren't playing in your premier competition, the risk of not getting the financial return or the spectators or the viewership is really concerning. And that's the argument that goes back and forward. But if you're looking at it from a Silver Ferns perspective and a performance perspective and wanting to win World Cups and Commonwealth Games gold medals, you've got to be competing with the best every single week. So whilst it's great for Grace, it's really disappointing for the Silver Ferns next year to not have access to her. It's a bit of a head scratcher that you'd put yourself in that position to not allow that great opportunity of Suncorp to then transfer into great success on the international stage with the Ferns. So yeah, it's a tough one, I feel, for everyone involved, and hopefully a more reasonable solution is presented into the future to make sure that the game and everyone within it is looked after a little bit better.
Straight off the top of your head, if you were to look at the Silver Ferns team, how many of those players do you think that teams over there would have interest in?
Look, I think there'd be a couple, to be honest, and obviously it's probably your marquee types of players. Your Grace obviously was definitely on the radar there. You look at the imports that do come into our competition, a lot of them sit as goal shooters or goalkeepers or the occasional goal attacks in the Housebys and those types of players as well. So I don't think it would be a huge amount, to be honest. I think the talent of Australian athlete and other nations are really demanding contracts. And again, there's only 80 contracts in this competition, but you're probably looking at maybe 2 or 3 that might have been of great interest if available. But having said that too, like for the Ferns to take the next step, you need 6 or 7 to be of interest type of thing. So it'll be interesting to see what the next few years look like and whether that does shift and, things do evolve as they often do.
Yeah, netball New Zealand's definitely at a crossroads right now. So next year, the ANZ Premiership is being cut from 3 rounds to 2, which I think is a great thing. And Netball New Zealand, at the time that announcement was made, they said they were keen to use that window to introduce some new kind of event, whether that was just domestic or had an international component. When I asked the CEO yesterday about playing Jamaica, it was pretty cryptic, but she said there are a lot of Jamaican players in England and Australia, and having the ability to perhaps look at different ways of getting exposure to that style of play is probably top of mind for us. So they're looking at things. Dan, there's been talk of that at the end of the respective domestic league that maybe the top 2 teams have some kind of crossover games at the end. But given how long and intense the SCN is, how likely is it that you think the top players in Australia would want to then, at the end of that, play some more netball?
Yeah, I think it's great in theory and it sounds fantastic to have, more product and more content. But the reality is, an SSN season finishes and all of the elite players jump into their international environments and they're straight away into training and on tour. So I just find it really difficult to grasp where in the schedules or the annual calendars you would put these extra content in, and how you would make it work financially as well. It's I think it's a bit of a pie in the sky type of thought. Like, it sounds great, but the actual practicalities of it are a little bit difficult to actually functionally put in place because of the demands that are in line already, I guess.
Right, let's just wrap up. Keen to get your thoughts on where do you think the Constellation Cup will end up. Australia, obviously the holders. I'm thinking Silver Ferns might take 1 test. Where are you heading with that, Dion?
I've got 2 all written down, but if we don't win this first test on Sunday, then I think it'll be 3-1.
Yeah. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I feel like there's definitely 3 games going to Australia, and then that 4th game, wherever it falls in the series, is New Zealand's to be taken, I guess. And I think the Ferns are really going to desperately want to make sure they get at least 1 game. If not 2 would be, I think, a great result for the Ferns. But Yeah, I can see the Diamonds being pretty dominant, but I really hope we just see tightly contested games like these two nations should be playing all the time. So, yeah, let's see how it unfolds.
Let's go back to the good old days. 1 goal in it. All 4 tests.